Maybe you came here because lately you have been gripped by the strange, hollow sensation that you are somehow evaporating, slipping out of your own life even while you are standing right in the center of it. It is a quiet, nagging panic. The feeling that if you were to stop performing, if you were to stop holding your breath and bracing your shoulders against the demands of the day, you would simply vanish, leaving behind only the silhouette of a person everyone else expects you to be. You feel as though your very substance is thinning, stretched so thin by the need to be visible, to be useful, and to be recognized, that you are terrified of the dark, because the dark is where the performance finally ends. You are not fading because you are fundamentally lacking. You are fading because you have been using all your internal resources to paint an image of yourself for the world to see, and you have forgotten that the brush can be set down. The room around you is cooling, the air carrying a faint, mineral crispness like water drawn from a deep stone well, settling into the corners and smoothing out the edges of the day. Perhaps you can feel the texture of the fabric beneath your fingertips, not as a boundary, but as a bridge back to the reality of your own body. The only place where you can actually exist. The sounds outside, a distant, rhythmic hum of tires on wet pavement, or the occasional sigh of a tree bending in the night air are not interruptions. They are the backdrop of a world that is whole even when you are not paying attention to it. You are here, you are not a ghost, and you are not a shadow cast by someone else's expectations. You are the source of your own awareness, and that source is steady, clear, and perfectly still. Even when the image you have been projecting feels like it is flickering out, you are not broken because you have lost your sense of self-substance. Nor is it a sign of failure that you are tired of the constant effort required to be seen. Tonight, we will not try to force your mind into a state of rigid stillness, because forcing is just another way of painting over the surface. We will not try to manufacture a feeling of wholeness, because wholeness is not something you build, it is something you uncover once you stop trying to be an image. You are safe enough to soften. You are safe enough to let the edges of your persona blur, to let the ink of your identity run a little, and to discover that underneath the drawing, the paper has been white and waiting all along. You do not have to solve the problem of your own existence tonight. Consider this paradox. The harder you grasp at your own identity, the more you feel like you are losing it. You try to anchor yourself by achieving, by pleasing, by being the pillar for others. But these are just heavy coats you have been wearing to hide the fact that you feel thin. You believe that your substance depends on your performance, when the surprising truth of Buddhist wisdom is that the substance was never in the lines you drew, it was in the awareness that allowed the lines to appear. You are not the shadow cast on the wall of your social life or your professional role. You are the light that is casting the shadow. The light does not fade when the shadow moves. The light does not disappear when the image changes. Maybe you have felt this too. The intense, hollow ache of being the one who is supposed to hold it all together. The pillar of the household or the office. The person who never cracks, never fades, and never forgets their duty. You have been holding the sky up with your own spine, convinced that if you let your shoulders drop, the whole world will collapse. But have you ever noticed that the sky does not need a pillar to stay where it is? The sky does not need you to hold it, and the pillar, grand as it is only an object in the courtyard, not the sky itself. You are suffering because you have mistaken your duty for your destiny. You are exhausting yourself trying to maintain an architecture that was meant to be temporary. And now you are afraid that if the architecture falls, you will be revealed as empty. Dear friend, the emptiness you fear is actually your greatest sanctuary. When you finally stop trying to hold the roof up, you don't fall apart, you simply become available to the space you were occupying all along. We are going to explore the path of the master painter, someone who knew that the most beautiful work of art is the one that knows when to stop, when to leave the space untouched, and when to let the image be nothing more than a suggestion. You have been a student who tried to capture the sun with a single brushstroke, and you are exhausted because the sun cannot be captured. But you don't need to capture it. You are already standing in its warmth. You have been acting as a curator of your own life, constantly deciding what to show, what to hide. and how to frame the view so that no one notices the cracks in the stone. It is no wonder your nerves feel frayed. It is no wonder your mind keeps replaying the moments where you felt less than or unreal. But nothing is required of you now. The silence in this room does not ask you to justify your presence. The night does not require you to hold a shape. You are invited to be exactly as you are, a person who is tired of the ink, tired of the canvas, and ready to feel the cool, clean, untouched paper of your own true nature. In the moments ahead, we will follow the story of a student who was so obsessed with painting the wind, so obsessed with proving his own depth, that he lost the ability to feel the breeze on his own skin. We will learn how his desperate need to be a painter of substance became the very thing that made him feel hollow. But for now, just let the feeling of the room come to you. Notice the weight of the air, the soft, rhythmic rising and falling of your chest, and the way the shadows seem to tuck you in, shielding you from the need to leave a mark on the world. You are not required to be a finished mural for the sake of the morning. You are only required to be a human being, resting in the expansive, quiet, and unpainted reality of the night. If it feels right, notice the way your body wants to let go. Maybe your hands, which have spent so long clutching at the brushes of your own life, can finally open, feeling the vast empty air between your fingers. Maybe your jaw, which has been held tight in the anticipation of the next performance, can finally unclench, feeling the cool, empty space of the room. You are not abandoning your journey, you are simply acknowledging that for this time the canvas can be left blank, the ink can dry, the brush can be rinsed and set aside. You are allowed to be, for these hours, someone who is simply letting the day finish its cycle without having to sign it. You are safe enough to stop. You are safe enough to let the definition of who you were supposed to be dissolve into the stillness of the room. You are safe enough to be undrawn, to be undefined, and to be unseen by anyone other than yourself. You do not need to know where your boundaries end and the world begins, because in this stillness there is no collision. There is only the wide, deep, and utterly welcoming silence of the night. You have been working so hard to ensure that your identity is thick enough to survive the scrutiny of others. But perhaps the transparency is the very thing that will make you free. What if the most authentic version of you is not the one who leaves the darkest mark, but the one who can stand in the middle of the paper and say, I am here, I am aware, and I am whole, even if no one is looking? This is not a state of apathy. It is a state of deep-rooted reality. It is the peace of someone who has finally realized that they were never the ink, they were always the hand that held the brush. And the hand is finally learning how to rest. And look at how the room around you has started to respond. You aren't forcing the shadows to be still. You aren't forcing the walls to stop their cooling. You are just allowing the environment to be what it is. And in doing so, you are finding that your body is naturally aligning with that stillness. This is the wisdom of the brush. The wisdom that recognizes that the lack of a mark is not a lack of life, but an invitation to witness the vastness. The thoughts that are rushing to define you are not the masters of your house. They are just visitors, passing through the studio, hoping to be painted, hoping to be given a name. But you don't have to name them. You don't have to paint them. You can let them be what they are: small, fleeting flickers of activity, while you remain the wide, white, and steady paper that holds them all without being stained. Your own struggles, your own periods of feeling thin, and your own times of fearing your own transparency are all part of the process of realizing you are the source, not the sketch. So let the brush be. Let the ink stay in the jar. You don't have to explain why you aren't the person you were yesterday. You don't have to apologize for the fact that you are no longer trying to perform a life for the sake of an audience. You are exactly as you are, and that is sufficient. You have nothing left to prove to the canvas, and you have nothing left to prove to the shadows. You are finally, after so much striving, simply allowed to be. The stillness that is growing inside you now is not an absence of life, but a density of it. It is the quiet of the studio at night, dark and rich and full of the promise that comes when you stop trying to fix the image. You are moving deeper into this realization, deeper into the truth that you are not the one who must force the self to be solid. The self is as fluid as the ink, as airy as the wind, and as white as the paper. Take a deep, slow breath and feel that breath settle into your very bones. You are doing well. You are doing enough, and you are being held by the very awareness you once thought you had to protect. In a province perched so high in the mountains that the clouds often drifted through the doorways of the houses, there lived a young man named Kaito. He was a master of a delicate and ancient craft. He was a painter of scrolls, specializing in capturing the fleeting, ephemeral moods of the high-altitude landscape. Kaito was known for the sharpness of his vision and the steady precision of his hand. People from the lowlands would travel for weeks just to commission a painting of a winter storm or the first thaw of spring, believing that Kaito possessed the secret to freezing time itself. But Kaito lived in a state of quiet, mounting panic. He felt that his identity was bound to the quality of his ink and the clarity of his lines. If a brushstroke went slightly astray, or if the light in his studio shifted in a way that made his colors seem dull, he felt as if he were literally disappearing, losing the very substance that made him real. His studio was a narrow wooden room with a single, large paper screen overlooking the abyss of the valley. It was a space of extreme order. His brushes were aligned by size and stiffness. His stone water-grinding dish was kept free of the slightest grain of sand, and he ground his own pine-soot ink with a ritualistic, obsessive intensity. Every morning, Kaito began his work by grinding the soot for exactly 100 rotations, convinced that any deviation would result in an ink that lacked the soul required to capture the world. He was terrified of the blankness of the paper, yet even more terrified of the mark he would leave upon it, believing that his worth was written in the permanence of the image. One late autumn afternoon, a master painter, an elderly woman who was rumored to have once painted the wind for an emperor, came to visit Kaito's studio. She did not bring her own tools, nor did she speak a word of greeting. She simply walked to the screen, looked out at the jagged gray peaks shrouded in an early-season fog, and then turned to watch Kaito as he prepared his ink. Kaito was, as usual, grinding the stone with a frantic, rhythmic pressure, his brow furrowed, his shoulders pulled up toward his ears. He was so focused on the consistency of the soot that he did not notice the master painter had walked over to his work table. She reached out and placed her thin, wrinkled hand over his, halting the grinding stone mid-motion. The sudden silence was startling. The rhythmic scritch-scratch of stone against stone, which Kaito had used to anchor his reality for years, ceased, and the room felt unnervingly empty. "The ink is ready when it is ready," she said, her voice sounding like dry leaves skittering across a wooden deck. "Why are you trying to force the blackness into the water?" Kaito looked down at the dish. He had been so intent on the perfection of the texture that he hadn't noticed the water was already dark, thick, and perfectly rich, I thought. He began, his voice thin and unsure that if I worked harder, if I dedicated more effort to the process, the result would be more real. If the painting is perfect, then the painter is real. If the painting is flawed, the painter is nothing. The master painter did not laugh. She picked up a small, weathered brush. The handle was worn smooth, and the tip was missing the singular golden bristle that Kaito considered essential for fine detail, and dipped it into his ink. She did not go to the pristine waiting paper. Instead, she turned toward the large, translucent paper screen that covered the window, the screen that allowed the mountain light to filter into the room. She made a single, sweeping, jagged gesture across the paper, not with ink, but by simply pressing the wet, empty brush against the fibers. It left a faint, translucent trace of water, a mark that would vanish the moment the mountain sun struck it. "You have spent your life trying to paint the mountain on the paper so that you might know you exist," she said, pointing to the spot where the water was already evaporating. "But look, the mountain does not care if you paint it. The wind does not care if you capture it. And you are not the brush. You are not the ink. You are the screen." She handed him the brush. It felt light, almost weightless in his hand. She then reached into the ink dish, and to Kaito's horror, tipped the remaining liquid onto the floor, where it pooled in a dark, irregular blot that had no form and served no purpose. "Now," she said, her eyes twinkling with a strange, compassionate light, "the paper is blank again. You are not defined by what you have left behind. You are defined by the fact that you are standing here, breathing in the middle of a room that has no need for your art to be real." Kaito stood frozen. The ink on the floor was a mess, a disaster of his morning's work. Yet he felt a strange Cooling sensation moved through his chest. He looked at the empty dish. He looked at his hands, which were stained with soot, and for the first time, he didn't feel the need to scrub them clean. He didn't feel the need to grind another batch of ink. The fear of disappearance, that hollow, thin panic that had haunted him for years, seemed to be receding, replaced by a quiet, steady awareness of the air in the room, the sound of the mountain wind, and the physical reality of his own feet on the wooden floor. He was there, he was present, and he was not a painting. He watched the sun finally crest the peak and strike the screen, and the watermark he had made, that fleeting, fragile thing, simply vanished. He had not captured it. He had not kept it. He had simply allowed it to be, and then allowed it to pass. He looked at the master painter, and she was already walking toward the door. She did not ask him to follow, and she did not ask him to finish his work. She just stepped out into the mountain fog and was gone, leaving him alone in the quiet studio. Kaito didn't move for a long time. He stood in the center of the room, listening to the silence. He thought of all the scrolls he had painted, all the years he had spent, trying to prove his substance through the permanence of his art. He realized that every mark he had ever made was just a temporary attempt to hold onto a sense of self that was never meant to be held. The self was not a fixed image, it was a process, a stream of experiences that flowed through the screen of his awareness. The screen didn't need to hold the marks to be a screen, it just needed to be there, clear and receptive, allowing the world to pass through it. He walked over to the window and looked out at the valley. The fog was rolling in, changing the shape of the world by the second. He saw that he could not paint this, he could not capture it, and he realized with a deep, shuddering release of his entire body that he didn't have to. He was a part of the fog. He was a part of the mountain. He was a part of the light that made the fog visible. He took the worn brush he was still holding and placed it in the empty ink dish. He didn't clean it. He didn't put it back in its perfect alignment. He just left it there, a small, humble thing sitting in the middle of his workspace. He walked over to the floor and sat down, not in the lotus position of a monk, but simply the way a man sits when he is finally, truly tired. He felt the cold wood against his legs. He felt the weight of his own body, no longer braced or held or performed. He just breathed. He allowed the day to move past him, and he found that he was not disappearing. He was arriving. There is a lesson here that moves beneath the surface of the story. You have been like Kaito, spending so much of your life grinding the soot of your own identity, trying to make it thick enough, dark enough, and permanent enough so that the world would notice you. You have felt that if you weren't constantly working on your image, if you weren't constantly painting your virtues or your accomplishments, you would be lost to the abyss. But look at the screen. You are the screen, not the ink. The awareness that is noticing these words right now is the same awareness that has been with you since you were born, long before you learned how to pick up a brush or how to worry about the lines you were leaving behind. You have been terrified of the blankness, but the blankness is not an enemy. It is the necessary ground for all of life. It is the openness that allows for the possibility of a new breath, a new feeling, and a new way of being. You don't have to be a masterpiece for your life to be meaningful. You don't have to be a permanent, unchanging image to be real. You are real because you are aware. You are real because you can feel the air on your skin. You can hear the rhythm of the wind, and you can hold space for the entirety of your own experience without needing to label it, capture it, or sign it. You are moving into a deeper understanding tonight. You are beginning to see that the suffering you feel when you are thin or invisible is not a sign of your lack of substance. It is a sign of your commitment to the performance. You are exhausted because the role is exhausting. You are hollow because the image you are carrying is not you. It is just an object you have been holding, a brush you have been clutching so tightly your hand has gone numb. But you can set it down. You can let the ink dry in the dish. You can let the paper be white. And in that stillness, you might finally find the person who has been waiting for you to stop painting, so that you could finally begin to live. The room you are in is a studio of a different kind tonight. It is a place where you are allowed to stop being a masterpiece and start being a human being. The work of the day is finished. The brush is put away. The ink is drying. There is only the long, deep, and inviting stillness of the night. and you are the screen on which the world is currently resting. You are not losing your substance, you are reclaiming your freedom. Breathe into that freedom. Feel how much lighter you are when you aren't trying to leave a mark. Feel how much deeper the night is when you aren't trying to draw it. You are here, you are enough, and you are finally truly ready to rest. The master painter's lesson was not a call for the abandonment of your craft or the rejection of your passions. It was not a command to move through life as a household vessel, unfeeling and uncommitted. Rather, it was a subtle invitation to recognize the difference between being a participant in your life and being a frantic architect of your own image. You feel that ache of fading because you have placed your faith in the permanence of the marks you leave behind your achievements, your titles, the way you appear to others, and the consistency of your emotional performance. You have come to believe that if you aren't constantly grinding the soot, if you aren't constantly pressing the brush to the paper, you might simply cease to be. But the wisdom of the screen reminds us that the paper does not become the ink, and the light does not become the shadow. Think about how often you have treated your internal state as something that needs to be permanently fixed, like a scroll that must never be unrolled or a mural that must never fade. You try to hold your confidence in place. You try to pin down your sense of purpose, and you try to solidify your identity against the shifting currents of your days. When the wind blows, when life brings inevitable change, disappointment, or the simple passage of time, you feel that your substance is dissolving. You feel as though you are losing your grip. But this feeling of loss is only a loss of the image. It is only the fading of the sketch, the source of your awareness. The screen itself is untouched by the changing weather of your experiences. This is what Buddhist wisdom calls the path of the middle way, and it is much simpler than we often make it sound. It is not about becoming cold or indifferent. It is about learning to distinguish between the content of your life and the container of your life. The content, your worries, your triumphs, your work, your relationships, is constantly shifting, moving, and evaporating. It is meant to be that way. That is the nature of the mountain fog. But the container, the clear awareness that witnesses all of it, remains steady. When you suffer, it is usually because you have become convinced that you are the content. You have identified with the worry, identified with the anxiety, and identified with the exhaustion. And so you believe that when those things move, you are moving with them, fraying and tearing as you go. The suffering you feel is rarely just the thing that happens to you. It is the second layer, the second wound, that you add through your own resistance. The first wound is the reality of being human, the vulnerability, the tiredness, the fact that you cannot control how others perceive you. But the second wound is the voice that says, I should be stronger than this, or I should have maintained my composure better. Or if I am not constantly proving my value, I am nothing. That voice is not you. That voice is just the sound of the grinding stone, repeating its cycles, unaware that the water is already rich and ready. You are adding a layer of shame to your own humanity, and that shame is the ink that is staining the paper. You are not being asked to stop feeling. You are being asked to stop feeding the feeling with your own demand that it be different. When you feel thin, when you feel invisible, when you feel the panic of disappearing, notice the reaction your mind has. It reaches for the brush. It reaches for the ink. It tries to paint a new version of yourself that is thicker, more permanent, more solid. It tries to draw a me that is invulnerable. But the act of drawing is the act of separation. Every time you define yourself, you are cutting yourself off from the vastness of your own experience. You are trying to capture the mountain on a scroll, and in doing so, you are turning your back on the mountain itself. This is the meaning of letting go. Letting go does not mean you stop living your life, and it certainly does not mean you stop loving the things you love. It means you stop trying to own the experience. It means you stop trying to freeze the moment in place so that you can look at it later and decide if it was enough. You can care deeply about your work, your friends, and your own healing without needing to hold them in a rigid frame. You can participate in your life with a grip that is loose, respectful, and open, rather than a grip that is frantic, protective, and fearful. Mindfulness, in this quiet light, is simply the act of putting the brush down. It is the decision to look at the screen of your awareness and recognize that you are not the ink. You are the space where the ink appears. You are the space where the morning sun strikes the window. You are the space where the wind of your own thoughts passes through, leaving no trace, changing nothing of the screen's true nature. When you stop trying to sign your name to every moment, you find that the moment is richer, deeper, and more vibrant than any portrait you could have possibly painted of it. Compassion arises naturally when you stop trying to be a masterpiece. When you stop demanding that you be a finished, polished, permanent version of yourself, you can finally offer yourself the same grace you offer a landscape. You don't look at a cloud and say, "You are failing because you aren't a mountain." You don't look at a shadow and say, "You are broken because you aren't the sun." You accept them as they are, in their fleeting, beautiful, and temporary expressions. Why then do you deny yourself that same acceptance? Why do you insist that your moods be permanent, that your energy be consistent, and that your identity be a solid, unmoving object? The anxiety you feel about your own substance is a call for a different kind of homecoming. It is a call to return to the source, to the awareness that is always looking out through your eyes, listening through your ears and feeling the texture of your life. That awareness is not thin. It is not fading. It is the only thing that is truly real. It is the paper that was here before the ink was ever ground, and it is the paper that will remain long after the brush is laid to rest. You are not losing yourself. You are shedding the illusions that made you feel like you were something that could be lost. As you listen to these words, consider the possibility that the emptiness you have been running from is not a lack of existence, but an abundance of potential. It is the spaciousness that allows you to be kind, to be curious, and to be present. If you were a fixed, solid, and unmoving object, you would be brittle. You would be incapable of change, incapable of learning, and incapable of the profound, quiet grace of letting go. It is your fluidity, your capacity to be uninked that makes you so deeply, beautifully human. You are safe enough to be transparent for a while. You are safe enough to stop carrying the heavy load of your own self-definition. The world will not collapse if you don't paint a portrait of yourself every hour. The sky will not fall if you don't stand guard over your own reputation. You are part of the vastness, not the curator of it. And in this vastness, you can finally find the rest that has been hiding in plain sight, not behind the image you have worked so hard to create, but right here, in the quiet, empty, and welcoming center of your own true nature. Feel the tension in your shoulders begin to release. As you acknowledge this, you have been carrying a heavy, elaborate frame around the portrait of your own life. It is heavy, it is sharp, and it is constantly pressing against you. You are allowed to take the frame off. You are allowed to let the picture be what it is, without the need for a signature, without the need for an audience, and without the need for a record. There is no judge standing in the corner of this studio. There is only the long, deep, and inviting silence of the night, and you, the witness, finally realizing that you were never the art, but the canvas that holds the possibility of all things. This realization is not a finish line. It is a change in the way you walk the path. You will still have your roles, you will still have your work, and you will still have your feelings, but they will not own you in the way they once did. They will be like visitors, like guests who come to the studio to show you something, and then leave when their time is up. You are the house, you are the space, you are the stillness that allows the visitors to have their moment. And when they leave, you are still here untouched, unbroken, and perfectly complete. Stay with this for a moment. Feel how the air in the room feels different when you aren't trying to fill it with your own efforts. It is more expansive, more breathable, and more honest. You are becoming a person who knows how to inhabit their own presence without the crutch of performance. And that, dear friend, is the greatest rest you could ever find. Just breathe and let the truth of your own presence settle into the marrow of your bones. You don't have to be anything. You are already everything that the moment requires you to be. And that is more than enough for tonight. If it feels right, allow your awareness to rest within the space of your own body, not as an observer checking for faults, but as a person finally sitting down after a long, arduous journey. You do not need to alter your posture or adjust your breathing. The body knows how to settle into the quiet if you simply grant it permission to do so. Perhaps you can feel the contact of your limbs against the sheets, a heavy, grounded sensation that connects you to the safety of this room. Let your awareness flow downward, from the crown of your head to the soles of your feet, letting each muscle acknowledge the presence of the night. There is no need for your muscles to hold a shape, no need to remain alert, no need to protect anything. Take a slow, gentle breath, noticing the cool air as it enters your nostrils and the subtle warmth as it leaves. There is nothing to achieve in this moment. You are not practicing to become better at peace. You are practicing to be present with the person who is already here, tired and searching. If it feels right, bring to your mind a single thought, one that has been recurring today, that feels like a piece of charcoal you are obsessively trying to grind into ink. Perhaps it is a worry about a decision you haven't made, or the memory of a conversation that felt jagged, or an anticipation of tomorrow that feels like a heavy weight on your chest. You do not need to fight this thought, and you certainly do not need to rewrite it. Simply name it, as if you were looking at a smudge on a piece of paper and observing its shape. You might silently whisper, "This is the sound of the grinding stone," or "This is the feeling of trying to paint a life that is still changing." You are not the master painter anymore. You are simply noticing that a thought has come to rest in your mind. What happens if you look at that thought, see the effort involved in trying to force it to be permanent, and then choose to do nothing with it? Imagine the heavy, water-filled grinding dish, the tool of your own frantic definition, sitting on the table beside you. It is crafted with such weight, such historical pressure, yet it is currently unused. It is simply an object, like a stone or a piece of wood. The thought you are holding is like a brushstroke you have tried to pry into perfection with your own trembling fingers. What would it feel like to release the brush, to stop checking the lines, and to step back from the screen? If it feels right, visualize yourself setting the brush down. Let your hands be empty, resting softly in your lap, no longer tasked with carrying the weight of your own image. There is no need to keep the canvas perfectly lined. There is no need to prove that you can manage the clarity of your own identity. The darkness around you is not a place to be feared, it is the natural, resting state of the studio when the work is finished. Notice how, as you stop trying to inspect the marks, the mind begins to loosen its grip on the definitions it has created. You are not a set of sketches, nor are you a history of gathered images. You are the space where the night, the breathing, and the thoughts occur, all at once, without hierarchy. If you find that your mind reaches for the brush again, if you feel the familiar pull to check or define, acknowledge that impulse with kindness. It is a very old, very tired part of you that thinks it is protecting you from the uncertainty of being human. You might say to it, "I see you. You are trying to help me feel real." Then, with a soft exhale, let that impulse drift away. You are not abandoning your true self. You are discovering that you are already whole, even in the parts of your life that feel blurred or undrawn. What if you allowed yourself to be, just for these moments, a person who does not have an immaculate portrait? What if you leaned into the sensation of having scattered thoughts, not as a failure but as a rest? Feel the weight of your body pressing into the bed, sinking into the soft, undrawn reality of the present. You do not need to know the name of the wind that is blowing outside. You do not need to know the pattern of your own essence. You only need to know that you are breathing, that you are warm, and that you are here. Even noticing that your mind is wandering is a form of profound rest. You do not need to snap your attention back to a focal point. You can simply allow the awareness to expand. Like the studio floor itself, there is room for your worries, there is room for your fatigue, and there is room for the silence that underlies them all. If the thoughts return, observe them as if they were watermarks on the screen, coming to their own time, without you needing to press a brush against them. You are the screen, not the painter. If it feels right, place one hand over your heart. Feel the warmth of your own palm against your chest. This is the only art that matters tonight, the steady, rhythmic beat of a heart that has walked so many days, through so many shadows, and so many miles of mental terrain. It does not need a perfect line to find its way. It is already doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is sustaining your life, breath by breath, beat by beat, in the dark, without any input from your performance. You might notice that as you stop reaching for the brushes of your own definition, the room around you feels a little more spacious. The silence is no longer an empty void you have to fill with explanations. It is a canvas that is already complete. You don't have to put anything on it. You don't have to leave any mark. You are simply resting in the presence of your own existence. If you feel a sense of unease as you stop the work, stay with that sensation for a moment. Do not push it away. Let it be another watermark on the screen. It is not an enemy to be hurried. It is just another part of the process. If you can let it sit there without needing to analyze it, you will find that the unease eventually changes its nature. It may grow quieter, or it may shift into something else, like a soft, blurring shadow at the end of the day. You have the choice, in every moment, to be either the student caught in the cycle of painting, or the witness who knows the beauty of the blank paper. When you choose to be the observer, you stop adding the second wound of judgment. You stop blaming yourself for the fact that you are human, and that human lives are rarely solved, rarely perfectly lined, and rarely permanent. You are safe enough to soften. You are safe enough to let the definitions of what you should be drawing simply dissolve into the paper of your own awareness. You have been holding the brush of your expectations for so long, and your fingers are likely cramped and tired. But look, the brush is already set down. Your hand is empty. Your heart is quiet. There is no need to hurry. There is no need to arrive anywhere else. The studio is here. The dark, vast mountainside is surrounding it, silent and enduring. The wind is moving through the valley, just as it has for centuries, without any permission from your ink. You are part of that ancient, unhurried rhythm. You are part of the light, the space, and the slow, deep work of being. As you continue to breathe, notice the sensation of letting go of the need to be defined. What a relief it is to simply be here, without having to explain the lack of progress in your own life. What a weight is lifted when you realize that nobody is waiting for your portrait to be finished, and there is no master demanding your art. There is only the long, quiet night, the gentle support of the bed beneath you, and the slow, unfolding process of being alive. If you feel ready, allow yourself to sink a little deeper into the mattress. Let the bed hold the weight you have been carrying. You have been the one holding your image up for so long. Let the gravity hold you now. Let the architecture of the building hold you. You are part of the world, not separate from it. You are allowed to be small. You are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to be, for this moment, entirely unpainted. The student eventually learned that the most beautiful part of his life was the moment he set down his brush, stepped back from the screen, and looked at the mountain with his own unfiltered eyes. He realized that the landscape wasn't something he had to capture for the sake of his reputation. It was something he had to experience for himself. And tonight, you are doing the same. You are moving from the role of the creator to the role of the witness. And in that transition, you will find the rest you have been searching for all along. Stay here in this softness. There is no rush to conclude, no rush to change. If the thoughts return, just observe them as if they were watermarks on the screen, appearing and then fading before they can even be named. They don't need you to capture them. They just need you to see them and let them be. You are the canvas, not the ink. You are the light, not the shadow. And the night is a wide, dark, gentle space waiting to hold whatever you are ready to stop defining. In a valley hidden so deeply behind the jagged peaks that the sun only reached the floor for 2 hours each day, there lived a master of mirrors named Sora. He was a man obsessed with clarity. In his workshop, he worked with obsidian and polished silver, creating surfaces so perfectly smooth that a person could look into them and see their own reflection, with an accuracy that was almost painful. People traveled to him to buy mirrors, not just for their beauty, but because they believed that if they could see themselves clearly enough, if they could study every pore, every line of age, and every shadow on their skin, they would finally understand who they were. Sora himself was the most dedicated student of his own mirrors. He spent his evenings examining his reflection, searching for the self that he felt should be behind the surface of his eyes. He worried about the deepening lines on his forehead, which he viewed as failures of his own internal peace. He studied the way his mouth set into a grim line whenever he worried about his reputation. and he tried to correct his expression by force of will, standing before the polished silver for hours until his face felt like a frozen wooden mask. He was convinced that if he could only polish his external presence into a state of perfection, he would finally feel solid, substantial, and permanent. The emotional wound he carried was a silent, corrosive fear of being thin. He felt that if he didn't constantly monitor his reflection, if he didn't constantly curate the image of himself that he presented to the world, he would simply evaporate into the mountain mist. He was the most polished man in the valley, yet he felt the most fragile. He was brittle. A single word of criticism from a neighbor, a minor flaw in a mirror he was crafting, or even a sudden shift in the light that made his reflection seem different than the day before, would send him into a tailspin of frantic labor, scrubbing and polishing, trying to recover the ideal version of himself that he had created in his mind. One morning, a traveler arrived at his workshop, an old woman who walked with a limp and carried nothing but a heavy, cloth-wrapped bundle. She didn't ask for a mirror. She simply set her bundle on his workbench and asked for a place to rest. Sora, irritated by the interruption to his polishing, barely looked up. He was busy working on a new obsidian piece, trying to capture the exact, unwavering perfection of his own gaze. The old woman sat in the corner, watching him work. For hours, Sora didn't stop. He wiped the glass, he looked at his face, he sighed at a stray wrinkle. He wiped again, he looked again. The cycle was frantic, driven by that same old buzzing agitation that had defined his life. Finally, the old woman spoke. "You are working very hard to fix the reflection," she said, her voice dry and steady. "But tell me, Sora, have you ever tried to fix the light?" Sora turned, frustrated. "The light is the light. It comes from the sky. It is outside my control." "And yet," she said, nodding toward his mirror, "you are spending your entire life trying to alter the image that the light creates, as if the reflection were the truth." She unwrapped her bundle, revealing not a mirror, but a heavy, irregular piece of coarse, unpolished iron. She handed it to him. It was cold, and its surface was so dark and pitted that it couldn't hold a reflection at all. It was just a slab of metal, rough to the touch and entirely lacking in polish. "Look into this," she commanded. Sora looked. He saw nothing but a dark, distorted blur of his own presence. He felt a sudden sharp jolt of panic, the fear of not being able to see himself, of not being able to verify his own image. He began to breathe quickly, his hands shaking. "I cannot see anything," he whispered. "It is useless. It is broken." "It is not broken," she replied softly. "It is honest. It doesn't ask you to be anything other than what you are. It doesn't ask you to polish away the day. It doesn't ask you to perform. It just holds the space." She walked over to his workbench, took the cloth he used for polishing, and instead of picking up his beautiful silver mirror, she began to wipe the dust off the workbench itself, leaving the mirror untouched. She didn't tell him to stop polishing. She didn't tell him he was wrong. She just sat in the middle of the room, looking out the window at the mountains, not trying to capture them in a reflection, just looking at them. Sora watched her. He looked at his beautiful, perfect silver mirror, the project of his entire life, and then he looked at the rough slab of iron. He realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't looking for a flaw in his own skin. He was looking at the way the light in the room had shifted, the way the dust motes were dancing in the air, the way the mountain peaks were currently being swallowed by the fog. He felt a strange, quiet expansion in his chest. He realized that the person who was afraid of the wrinkle, the person who was afraid of the fading, was just another image in the mirror, a flickering, temporary, and ultimately unimportant reflection. He didn't have a sudden, explosive moment of enlightenment. He didn't suddenly become a master of all things. But he did something small, and that small thing changed everything. He reached out and placed his beautiful silver mirror face down on the workbench. He didn't break it. He didn't destroy it. He just chose not to look at it for the rest of the day. Instead, he walked over to the corner of the workshop, sat on the floor, and looked at the wall. He sat there for a long time. He felt the tightness in his neck. He felt the fear of the thinness, and he felt the urge to stand up and go back to his polishing. But he didn't. He breathed through the impulse. He let the urge to perform exist, and he let it pass. He realized that he could endure the feeling of being unseen, because he was the one doing the seeing. He was the one who could witness the fear without becoming it. When he finally looked up, the old woman was gone. She hadn't left a message, and she hadn't thanked him. She had just left the rough iron slab on his workbench. Sora walked over to it, but he didn't try to look into it to find himself. He used it as a paperweight to hold down a stack of notes, a functional, grounded, and entirely unpretentious object. His transformation was subtle, but it was absolute. He didn't stop making mirrors, but he stopped making them for himself. When a customer came to him, he would polish the silver until it shone. But he no longer checked his own face in the final result. He learned to work with the focus of a craftsman, but with the heart of a person who knew that the reflection was just a passing event, like a shadow or a sound. He started to take breaks during the day, not to look at himself, but to look at the mountain. He learned to eat his meals without looking at his reflection in the tea. He learned to speak to the people who visited his shop without constantly bracing himself to see how his face was being perceived. He was still Sora. He still had his lines, and he still had his fears, but he was no longer a prisoner to them. He had stopped trying to polish the light, and in doing so, he found that the light was finally allowed to hold him. You are witnessing the same shift tonight. You have been grinding the soot of your own identity, convinced that if you stop, you will disappear. You have been polishing the silver of your reputation, terrified that if you aren't perfect, you are nothing. But the truth is much quieter. You are the one who is witnessing the polishing. You are the one who is witnessing the worry. You are the one who is witnessing the feeling of being thin. And that witness is not thin, it is vast. That witness is not fading, it is the space where all of life is currently happening. When you feel the panic of invisibility rising, do not reach for the mirror of your own thoughts. Do not reach for the image you want others to see. Stop, breathe. Acknowledge that the feeling is just a reflection, just a shadow moving across the surface. You do not need to fix it. You do not need to polish it away. You only need to be the witness who knows that underneath the reflection, the paper is white, the light is clear, and the witness is perfectly whole. You are allowed to be invisible tonight. You are allowed to be unwitnessed. You are allowed to be unnamed. In this emptiness, you will find a rest that no amount of polishing could ever provide. It is the rest of the mountain, the rest of the fog, and the rest of the screen. You are moving deeper into this truth now, the truth that you are not the portrait. You are the presence that allows the portrait to be. And that presence is the only thing that is truly, deeply, and eternally real. Stay here in the quiet, and let the need to be a solid self simply dissolve into the vast, dark, and beautiful studio of the night. You have finally come home to yourself, not as an image, but as the awareness that sees it all. And in that seeing, you are already complete. The master painter's lesson was not a call for the abandonment of your craft or the rejection of your passions. It was not a command to move through life as a hollow vessel, unfeeling and uncommitted rather. It was a subtle invitation to recognize the difference between being a participant in your life and being a frantic architect of your own image. You feel that ache of fading because you have placed your faith in the permanence of the marks you leave behind your achievements, your titles, the way you appear to others, and the consistency of your emotional performance. You have come to believe that if you aren't constantly grinding the soot, if you aren't constantly pressing the brush to the paper, you might simply cease to be. But the wisdom of the screen reminds us that the paper does not become the ink, and the light does not become the shadow. Think about how often you have treated your internal state as something that needs to be permanently fixed, like a scroll that must never be unrolled, or a mural that must never fade. You try to hold your confidence in place. You try to pin down your sense of purpose, and you try to solidify your identity against the shifting currents of your days. When the wind blows, when life brings inevitable change, disappointment, or the simple passage of time, you feel that your substance is dissolving. You feel as though you are losing your grip. But this feeling of loss is only a loss of the image. It is only the fading of the sketch, the source of your awareness. The screen itself is untouched by the changing weather of your experiences. This is what Buddhist wisdom calls the path of the middle way, and it is much simpler than we often make it sound. It is not about becoming cold or indifferent. It is about learning to distinguish between the content of your life and the container of your life. The content, your worries, your triumphs, your work, your relationships, is constantly shifting, moving, and evaporating. It is meant to be that way. That is the nature of the mountain fog. But the container, the clear awareness that witnesses all of it, remains steady. When you suffer, it is usually because you have become convinced that you are the content. You have identified with the worry, and identified with the anxiety, and identified with the exhaustion. And so you believe that when those things move, you are moving with them, fraying and tearing as you go. The suffering you feel is rarely just the thing that happens to you. It is the second layer, the second wound, that you add through your own resistance. The first wound is the reality of being human, the vulnerability, the tiredness, the fact that you cannot control how others perceive you. But the second wound is the voice that says, I should be stronger than this, or I should have maintained my composure better, or if I am not constantly proving my value, I am nothing. That voice is not you. That voice is just the sound of the grinding stone, repeating its cycles, unaware that the water is already rich and ready. You are adding a layer of shame to your own humanity, and that shame is the ink that is staining the paper. You are not being asked to stop feeling. You are being asked to stop feeding the feeling with your own demand that it be different. When you feel thin, when you feel invisible, when you feel the panic of disappearing, notice the reaction your mind has. It reaches for the brush. It reaches for the ink. It tries to paint a new version of yourself that is thicker, more permanent, more solid. It tries to draw a me that is invulnerable. But the act of drawing is the act of separation. Every time you define yourself, you are cutting yourself off from the vastness of your own experience. You are trying to capture the mountain on a scroll, and in doing so, you are turning your back on the mountain itself. This is the meaning of letting go. Letting go does not mean you stop living your life, and it certainly does not mean you stop loving the things you love. It means you stop trying to own the experience. It means you stop trying to freeze the moment in place so that you can look at it later and decide if it was enough. You can care deeply about your work, your friends, and your own healing without needing to hold them in a rigid frame. You can participate in your life with a grip that is loose, respectful, and open, rather than a grip that is frantic, protective, and fearful. Mindfulness, in this quiet light, is simply the act of putting the brush down. It is the decision to look at the screen of your awareness and recognize that you are not the ink. You are the space where the ink appears. You are the space where the morning sun strikes the window. You are the space where the wind of your own thoughts passes through, leaving no trace, changing nothing of the screen's true nature. When you stop trying to sign your name to every moment, you find that the moment is richer, deeper, and more vibrant than any portrait you could have possibly painted of it. Compassion arises naturally when you stop trying to be a masterpiece, when you stop demanding that you be a finished, polished, permanent version of yourself. You can finally offer yourself the same grace you offer a landscape. You don't look at a cloud and say, you are failing because you aren't a mountain. You don't look at a shadow and say, you are broken because you aren't the sun. You accept them as they are, in their fleeting, beautiful, and temporary expressions. Why then do you deny yourself that same acceptance? Why do you insist that your moods be permanent, that your energy be consistent, and that your identity be a solid, unmoving object? The anxiety you feel about your own substance is a call for a different kind of homecoming. It is a call to return to the source, to the awareness that is always looking out through your eyes, listening through your ears, and feeling the texture of your life. That awareness is not thin, it is not fading. It is the only thing that is truly real. It is the paper that was here before the ink was ever ground, and it is the paper that will remain long after the brush is laid to rest. You are not losing yourself. You are shedding the illusions that made you feel like you were something that could be lost. As you listen to these words, consider the possibility that the emptiness you have been running from is not a lack of existence, but an abundance of potential. It is the spaciousness that allows you to be kind, to be curious, and to be present. If you were a fixed, solid, and unmoving object, you would be brittle. You would be incapable of change, incapable of learning, and incapable of the profound, quiet grace of letting go. It is your fluidity, your capacity to be uninked that makes you so deeply, beautifully human. You are safe enough to be transparent for a while. You are safe enough to stop carrying the heavy load of your own self-definition. The world will not collapse if you don't paint a portrait of yourself every hour. The sky will not fall if you don't stand guard over your own reputation. You are part of the vastness, not the curator of it. And in this vastness, you can finally find the rest that has been hiding in plain sight, not behind the image you have worked so hard to create, but right here in the quiet, empty, and welcoming center of your own true nature. Feel the tension in your shoulders begin to release as you acknowledge this. You have been carrying a heavy, elaborate frame around the portrait of your own life. It is heavy, it is sharp, and it is constantly pressing against you. You are allowed to take the frame off. You are allowed to let the picture be what it is, without the need for a signature, without the need for an audience, and without the need for a record. There is no judge standing in the corner of this studio. There is only the long, deep, and inviting silence of the night. And you, the witness, finally realizing that you were never the art, but the canvas that holds the possibility of all things. This realization is not a finish line. It is a change in the way you walk the path. You will still have your roles, you will still have your work, and you will still have your feelings. But they will not own you in the way they once did. They will be like visitors, like guests who come to the studio to show you something, and then leave when their time is up. You are the house, you are the space, you are the stillness that allows the visitors to have their moment. And when they leave, you are still here untouched, unbroken, and perfectly complete. Stay with this for a moment. Feel how the air in the room feels different when you aren't trying to fill it with your own efforts. It is more expansive, more breathable, and more honest. You are becoming a person who knows how to inhabit their own presence without the crutch of performance. And that, dear friend, is the greatest rest you could ever find. Just breathe and let the truth of your own presence settle into the marrow of your bones. You don't have to be anything. You are already everything that the moment requires you to be. And that is more than enough for tonight. You might wonder how this wisdom, born in the quiet corners of a mountain valley, can survive the friction of your everyday life. It is easy to find clarity in the stillness of the night, but the real practice begins tomorrow, in the sudden interruptions and the small, familiar pressures that make you feel as though you must be something other than you are. The wisdom of the screen is not meant to be kept in a cloister. It is meant to walk with you into the grocery store, into the office, and into the spaces where you feel most vulnerable. Consider those moments when you are lying awake at night, your phone glowing in the dark, refreshing a feed or waiting for a message that you hope will provide some sense of certainty. In those moments, you are essentially back in the studio, frantically clutching the brush, desperate to force a mark onto the paper so that you can feel worthy of rest. You are not waiting for a text. You are waiting for a sign that your existence is valid. But the anxiety you feel while waiting is just the echo of your own need to control the image. It is the sound of you trying to keep the fog from shifting, trying to force the current of your life to be static. Next time you find yourself gripped by that need to check and recheck, pause for one heartbeat. Notice the tension in your hands as you hold the device. You are not required to put the phone away forever, but you are invited to recognize that you are currently trying to paint on a screen that is already clear. Simply naming the act, I am currently trying to force my peace because I am afraid of the weight, is the first, most powerful step toward setting down the brush. Or think about those times in your day when you are smiling and nodding at someone. Even though inside you feel exhausted, fragmented, or heavy, you feel as though you are obligated to maintain the image of the person who has it all figured out, the one who is constantly making progress on their internal path. You fear that if you show the slightest hesitation, the entire mural will be seen as ruined, and others will see you as you fear you are unfinished, unsure, or lost. But consider the freedom of acknowledging, just to yourself, that you are currently a traveler who does not know the way. When you stop pretending, you do not lose your integrity, you gain a profound, quiet strength. You can care deeply about the people in your life without having to grip the brush so tightly that your own palms ache. You can listen, you can respond, and you can participate without the constant, draining labor of bracing yourself against the unpredictability of every interaction. When you make a mistake, and you will, because you are human, notice if your first instinct is to immediately reach for the soot of self-judgment. We are taught that shame is a useful tool, that if we monitor our own internal canvas enough, we will somehow learn to be better. But shame is not a brush, it is a stain. It does not help you grow, it just keeps you trapped in the same loop of replaying what you should have done differently. The next time a mistake triggers that spiral of self-reproach, remember Kaito. Remind yourself, this is not a sign of failure. This is simply the sound of the wind. You do not need to rewrite your history to prove you are worthy. You do not need to hide your past. You only need to see it, accept that it exists as part of the terrain you have already crossed, and continue with the work of being present. The pressure to be ahead in life is perhaps the most persistent illusion of all. We compare our internal sense of confusion to the external display of someone else's life, and we conclude that we are failing to keep pace. But you are not behind. You are not on a track that requires you to reach a specific completion by a certain hour. You are a person walking through a valley, and your path is your own. Every season has its purpose. Your current season of feeling heavy, or uncertain, or simply tired is not an interruption of your life, it is a vital part of the landscape. To fight it is to fight the nature of your own existence. You may also find yourself trying to control the people around you, your partner, your children, your colleagues, because you fear that if they do not behave in a predictable way, the image of your life will be ruined. This is a common, understandable response to the fear of uncertainty, but you are not the director of their journey. You are not even the director of your own journey in the way you imagine. You are a participant, a witness, a presence. When you stop trying to manage the outcome of every interaction, you open the door to genuine connection. You allow the other person to be a mystery, and you allow yourself to be a person who can hold that mystery without needing to solve it. Even in the smallest actions, like the moment before you answer an email or respond to a difficult question, there is an opening for this wisdom. Most of our suffering comes from the impulsive, automatic way we react to the world, based on the fear that if we are not quick or perfect or correct, we will be vulnerable. Taking a single, conscious breath before you react is a form of profound discipline. It is a way of setting the brush on the table. That one breath creates a space where you can choose, rather than just repeat the old, tired patterns of your own mental painting. It is the difference between being a slave to the need to be substantial and being a person who is intentionally participating in their own life. You do not need to earn your rest by being a masterpiece, and you do not need to prove your worth by ensuring your internal mural is perfectly lined. The exhaustion you feel is the result of trying to force the ink to stay, trying to force your own life to be a static, unchanging work of art. You are permitted to be exactly as you are tonight. You are allowed to leave the worries unresolved, the past unfixed, and the marks where they rest. You are not a scientific record of your own labor. You are a human being who has been working very hard, and you have every right to lean back, to look at the screen, and to finally truly let go of the tools. The modern world asks you to be a permanent, unmoving monument of success, but the heart asks for nothing more than the permission to be resonant. You can be disciplined in your work. You can be caring toward others, and you can be mindful of your own growth, all without having to hold your breath to keep the lines perfect. You are safe enough to soften. You are safe enough to be seen with your history, your uncertainty, and your natural humanness. This is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning of a life where you are finally present for the beauty that was there all along, underneath all the fear. In the cool, solid, and enduring reality of your own body, you are already exactly where you need to be, and you have nothing left to prove to anyone, least of all to the version of yourself that thought it had to carry a brush to deserve peace. The silence that now fills your room is not empty. It is heavy with the relief of someone who has stopped painting. You can feel that same silence here, beneath the sheets, beneath the noise of the day, beneath the thoughts that try to tell you that you are not enough. You are here. You are exactly as you are, and that is enough. You don't have to carry the weight of those who came before you. You don't have to fill the gaps of their lives with your own striving. You are the traveler. and the traveler is allowed to simply sit in the studio, witnessing the light and staying right where they are. You have finished the work of the day, and now the canvas is asking you for nothing more than your presence. Take one more deep, slow breath, and feel that breath settle into your very bones, grounding you in the stillness that has been waiting for you all along. The studio is quiet now, and the brushes are finally still. All the frantic grinding of the pine suit has ceased, and the water in the dish has settled into a mirror-like darkness that asks for nothing. The mountain fog is pressing gently against the window screen, a soft, white presence that does not need to be painted, captured, or understood. Everything that felt so sharp and demanding during the day, the need to prove your substance, the fear of slipping away, the exhaustion of the performance is dissolving into this cool, cavernous dark. You have spent so long standing, so long straining toward the light, so long trying to fix the image of your life into something permanent, that this simple, horizontal surrender is a profound healing act. You are doing something very deep tonight, a work that is not measured by the depth of the ink or the precision of the lines, but by the radical permission to be undrawn. Your body is becoming heavy, a natural, rooted heaviness that pulls you deeper into the quiet security of your bed. The air in the room is still, cool, and clean, like the breath of the high valley at midnight. Each time you exhale, imagine letting go of one more layer of the painter who has been obsessively refining the portrait of your life. Let the muscles in your face soften, letting the brow lose its furrow and the mouth lose its tight line of concern. Let the weight of your arms and legs sink down, melting into the soft, yielding texture of the sheets. You are not a masterpiece to be preserved. You are the vast white paper that has always been here, waiting for you to realize that you are the canvas itself. The frantic scratching of the pen, the endless replaying of your mistakes, the constant need to sign your name to every moment, these have all finally fallen away. They are just echoes now, distant and fading like footsteps on a path you no longer need to walk. You are not late for anything. You are not behind on the portrait of your own existence. The mountain peak does not ask the cloud to stay, and the studio does not ask the ink to remain wet. You are finally, after so much striving, a guest in the studio of your own being. And the only thing the studio requires of you is that you breathe, that you rest, and that you allow the night to be enough. Let the teaching of the clear, untouched paper settle into your heart. You are not the image you have been trying to protect. You are the awareness that has been witnessing the painting all along. And as you drift, let the memory of the brush, the soot, and the struggle just dissolve into the soft velvet dark. You are safe. You are surrounded by a silence that is not empty, but full of the gentle, patient presence of your own life, which has been waiting for you to stop painting and finally start breathing. You don't have to carry the weight of the mural you thought you were required to build, and you don't have to clear the dust from the workspace with your own striving. You are the witness, and the witness has reached the end of the day. Your breath is quiet now, rhythmic and slow, a tide that moves without any command from your mind. Feel the stillness expanding, moving from your heart to your limbs, from your thoughts to the space surrounding you. The world is turning, the fog is shifting, and you are held within that movement, carried by the very light you once tried so desperately to capture. There is no need to solve your whole life tonight. The solutions, the sketches, the clarity, they are all part of a larger, slower geometry that will reveal itself in the morning light. For now, there is only the darkness, the safety of your own breath, and the profound, beautiful permission to stop being the one who holds the brush. You have done enough. You have traveled far. You have felt deeply, and you have finally found the space where you can let the work of becoming fall away. Rest now, in the absolute trust that your own inner studio knows exactly how to handle the dark. You are not falling. You are sinking into the paper that has always sustained you. You are not disappearing. You are finally coming home to the person you are, when no one is watching, when the brush is set down, and when the night is the only witness that matters. As you slip into the final quiet, listen to the stillness that remains. It is the sound of your own heart, untethered and free. It is the sound of the valley breathing in the dark, ancient and completely at peace. And perhaps, if you were to listen just a little bit closer to the silence that remains, What if the substance you have been trying to build was never something you had to paint, but simply the quiet, undrawn light that was always waiting for you to finally stop holding the brush?